dark thoughts that often accompany becoming a mother are often kept private and not discussed. Many prefer to put on a brave face and find it challenging, openly discussing dark or negative thoughts or seeking help. In this episode, I speak with Kaila Maguire, who talks about her journey as a first-time mum and the challenges she faced with postpartum issues and depression. Kaila really wants to help other mums in their pregnancy and childbirth journeys and started her own podcast called Parent Tell last November, and I was honoured to be interviewed by her recently. Kaila is very candid and open as she talks about her journey and has some great advice for first-time mums. I'm infant massage instructor Helen Thompson. Hello and welcome to First Time Mums Chat. Being a parent for the first time is challenging and changes your life in every way imaginable. To help ease your transition into parenthood, I aim to offer supportive, holistic approaches and insights for mums of babies aged 4 weeks to 10 months old. My goal is to assist you to become the most confident parent you can and smooth out the bumps along the way. This podcast is brought to you by My Baby Massage, so let's do this together. This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not constitute medical advice. Please contact a medical practitioner if you are concerned or have any medical issues. Hi Kaila, and welcome to First Time Mums Chat. I've been very excited about having you here. I'll get you to start by just giving my audience a little bit of information about who you are and sort of talk to me about first time mums.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me on. This is only my second time being a guest on a podcast as opposed to the host. So it's still a little strange, but fun at the same time.
Yes.
So my name is Kaila. I am an American. I'm sure you can tell by now. So I became a mom last year in May of 2020, and pandemic aside, that definitely huge effects on the end of my pregnancy, on, my birth, my fourth trimester, all of that. But that aside, pandemic aside, I feel like when I was pregnant, there were so many things happening to my body physically, and happening to me mentally that I just had no idea that you just go through so many different things that are way below surface level that a parent or a pregnant person had never talked to me about. And it was fascinating because I love to learn and I'm kind of a research person, but it was also really kind of scary at the same time.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah.
Like it was my first time being pregnant, and I just wasn't expecting, there was just so much more to it than I feel like we are led to believe, even from our friends. So my son was born in May, and I had a pretty difficult, I wouldn't say the whole fourth trimester, which is the first 3 months postpartum, pretty difficult, like 2 months. And I felt very isolated. And the postpartum in general was yet another thing that just had so many twists and turns and so many potentially dark corners that, again, I didn't feel prepared for. I felt like the stuff that I was experiencing, like postpartum anxiety or sleep deprivation, or even just like getting to know my kid and learning how a newborn works, it's not something that I was seeing on my social media. It's not something that I was talking about with my friends and my family. So again, it was just brand new information, and it was all really overwhelming. And so I'm now a stay-at-home mom, but before I gave birth to my son, I was a teacher. So I kind of feel like I started the podcast because the teacher in me didn't want anyone else to feel this way when they got pregnant or right after they had their kid. So I started my podcast, Parent Tell, in November of 2020, just as a way to kind of bring to the surface the things that really go on in pregnancy, postpartum, and parenthood that we're not seeing every day, but that almost every single person is going through. And, it can feel even more isolating when you're going through something that's not being reflected in mainstream society, TV, movies, stuff like that, because it just makes you feel, sometimes it makes you feel like you can't do this, or you're not a good parent, or there's something
Yeah.
wrong with you. And I feel like, especially since starting the podcast, I have learned that I'm not alone. There is nothing wrong with me. This is very, very hard. It's not just me, but I really wanted to kind of just have those discussions and share that with everybody else, to kind of let future parents or new parents, or even parents who've been parenting for 10, 15 years, that we can talk about this stuff. It's okay. We don't have to, we don't have to always rely on our highlight reel and say that everything is great and being a parent is awesome and we love it 24/7, because that's just not, it's just
No,
not the truth.
it's not natural to be like that, because it is fun and it is good, but it's not like that all the time. And
Exactly.
yeah.
So that's pretty much why I started my podcast, to just kind of talk about the parts that aren't as fun. We talk about the parts that are fun too, but we tend to, I just wanted to create a safe space for people to share their various pregnancy experiences, parenting experiences, because that is part of, I feel like that's part of the reason why there's so many things that really happen during pregnancy and postpartum and parenthood that we don't talk about. And part of the reason is because there's so many different outcomes, or there's so many different effects. Like, pregnancy affects every single person differently. And
Yes, of course it does. Yeah.
right. So I kind of just wanted to create this space where we can talk about anything and everything. It doesn't have to just be the positive things. You're allowed to say your unpopular parenting opinions or your unpopular pregnancy opinions. So that's what I do on Parent Tell.
You have a similar sort of approach to your podcast as I do with first-time mums, because I feel it's so important for first-time mums to be able to, like you're saying, be able to talk about things, because society is such that doesn't allow mums to sort of talk about it, because they think, as you said, they think you're being a terrible parent, or you're not doing the right thing. And they keep, that, and society is very much like that. So I totally get where you're coming from, because that's a sort of guideline of where I'm sort of going down. So
yeah, I was just gonna say, I feel like even just talking about it out loud, even just verbalizing it out loud, can help us feel better. And all it takes is one person, to say, oh my gosh, me too. Or like, yep, my son is not sleeping either. Or yeah, I have a really picky eater too, and it sucks. Or
yes.
I didn't like the newborn stage, and that's fine. Even just saying it out loud, I feel like has a lot of power.
Yes, it does. And it helps you to get through it as well. It helps you to understand where you're and other mums where you're coming from as well. And it gives other mums an idea of that it's not always that easy. So
Exactly.
So I was going to ask you, as you mentioned, I can never pronounce it, so please forgive me if I spell it, but postpartum anxiety. Sort of what exactly, you mentioned a little bit about it, but what, I'm not so very familiar with it. So what exactly is postpartum anxiety, and what would if first time mums are going through it, what would they sort of expect to? Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Yeah. So postpartum anxiety, or I'm sure you guys call it postnatal anxiety,
Yeah.
exact same thing, is similar to postpartum depression, but different in that the anxiety, a lot of, so anxiety is mental. And it's kind of, I guess, the easiest way to explain anxiety to a person who doesn't have anxiety, which, if you don't have anxiety, God bless you. I'm very jealous because I wish. The easiest way to explain is that in your brain, you have Google Chrome open and you have 100 tabs open in your browser. And it's making you feel overwhelmed. It's disorganized. Maybe like 3 or 4 of them are playing some music, or they're playing a video, but you don't know which tab is playing the video and you can't turn it off. It's just overwhelming and it's chaotic, but it's in your brain, like it's in your head. So postpartum anxiety looks different. It's kind of like what I said before, how pregnancy is different for everyone. Postpartum anxiety is different for everyone. But in general, it can involve a fair amount of intrusive thoughts, which I actually didn't know were a thing until I was experiencing them. I didn't know that's what they were called, and I didn't necessarily know that that was connected to postpartum anxiety until I just happened to read a social media post actually that described exactly how I was feeling. So, if you don't know what intrusive thoughts are basically those very dark thoughts that or scenarios that pop up in your head out of nowhere
Yeah.
and just kind of catch you off guard to the point where like your own thought is scaring you or just like, whoa, that is really dark. Where did that come from? One of the most common intrusive thoughts that I had very early on was that I was going to drop my son, like I was going to trip and drop him. Yeah. But can I tell you something? I don't have any stairs in my house. There's no
Oh,
stairs in my house. So that right there is a prime example of I
oh
have
gosh, that's
this,
scary thought. Yeah.
yeah, like I'm having this thought where I'm like, oh my God. But I mean, the likelihood of me tripping, especially if we have no stairs in our house, super low.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
and to this day, I mean, knock wood, I mean, he walks now. So if anything, we're like tripping over each other. But, I never dropped him, but that was a real fear that I had that I would be carrying this teeny tiny fragile human being and I would trip over something. And that was just, something that constantly was on my mind, or it would just pop up
Mm,
out of nowhere and kind of catch me off guard. And that's what an intrusive thought is. So I
yeah,
guess
that, yes.
getting back to what you asked me, it looks like intrusive thoughts. It looks like your mind racing. You're having difficulty going to sleep. You're having
Hmm.
difficulty staying asleep. And obviously, you're already experiencing that with a newborn because newborns do not know how to sleep through the night yet. But it's kind of compounded onto that where it's, the baby's finally asleep and you should, like, okay, I need to go to sleep. I need to go to sleep. But you're laying there and you're just thinking of, all of the things that you wanted to do today that you didn't do, or
Hmm.
all of the ways you were a quote bad parent today. And it's just really hard to settle your brain down and let yourself know that those thoughts are just thoughts and that thoughts aren't always real. And that's the really tricky thing about anxiety is that, our brains are so clever. So we think a thought and we think it for so long, or we have the same thought for so long
Hmm.
that we start to believe it's true, whether or not it really, whether or not it is. But
Yeah,
we,
yes, I can. Yeah.
so it's just, there's a lot of tabs open up there. You are having intrusive thoughts. You might be having for me, it manifested itself in irritability and postpartum rage, which is another fairly common symptom or effect that happens to you in postpartum. And a lot of it comes from lack of sleep. I already knew that I loved sleep. I already knew that I needed my sleep before I had my
Yes, and when
son.
you, yeah, and when you've got a baby, that completely goes out the window.
Yeah,
You're up. Yes.
I
Yeah.
completely underestimated the power of sleep deprivation.
Hmm.
I feel like before I had a kid, like, oh yeah, like I'm gonna be tired. I know what tired is. No, I did not.
You
I
know.
did not I did not know what long sustained sleep deprivation was like. And that really affects your anxiety too. Because if your brain is tired, everything is just off. There's a chemical imbalance. And my anxiety in general tends to manifest itself through anger. So I was
Mm.
very irritable, snapping at my husband, not really enjoying my son. And I
Mm.
will say, like, I'm one of those people, I'm not a newborn person. And I knew that before I gave birth. I'm a solid, like, see you at 6 months and up. Like, then we can hang out.
Yes.
Before that, I'm just like, I'm personally just not super interested. And of course, I loved my son, but the anxiety would creep in and I would feel like I'm not doing a good enough job, or am I pumping enough milk? How come he won't sleep? And it becomes your fault. It is so mental and your brain is so clever that it ends up just tricking you into believing that these like negative that this negative self-talk is real, is true.
Mm. Mm.
Um, and it's not. I would say that one of the other major things that I experienced and actually just told my husband the other day, I think it was yesterday, we were having a talk and I said, I honestly think I had postpartum anxiety and it went undiagnosed.
Yes, and I think
It took,
I think a lot of mums, it does go undiagnosed because we've got so many expectations what a
yeah.
mum in inverted commas should be like,
Mm-hmm.
and it's so much so underestimated. People don't talk about it, and I think it's such a powerful thing to talk about, as we said, because I've come from a childcare background, and I've actually seen so many mums who come in and they're just so fretful. They're fretful and they're very snappy, and they don't
Mm-hmm.
want to leave their baby because they're getting very fretful about it. But then they know that they have to, and they go away and they keep
Mm-hmm.
ringing you up every 5 minutes, sort of saying, "Oh, is my baby okay?" And so I've learned it from that experience. But hearing it
Yeah.
from you, who's actually gone through it as a mum, it sounds quite tough to go through. But what would you say to a mum to ease the process a little bit? Because I know you've got to be very sensitive to what you say to mums when they've got it, because you don't want
Mm-hmm.
to push anything on them. So what would your suggestions be to a mum who's going through it, and you've gone through it? How would you support them?
I am a big encourager, I guess, of talk therapy. I love therapy just because of how it's helped me as a person and how it's helped me to understand myself and understand my relationships with other people. I would say that if you feel like it's very hard for you to relax, or you
Yeah.
kind of have this like constant inner monologue, and a lot of it is scary or intrusive thoughts or negative self talk, or you just feel like you have to constantly be on your guard,
Mm-hmm.
almost to like constantly protect your baby as if
Yeah.
there's danger around the corner. That's another big thing of anxiety, is especially when you're a new parent, is you are just so, like you said, you're so fearful that something's going to happen to them that you're just constantly on the lookout for it. And that, I felt that way too. I had a hard time trusting other people with my baby. And I mean, we
Mm-hmm.
were, this was early pandemic. So the only people that we saw, my mother-in-law came down to help us out for a couple days. And then that was pretty much it. But I had a hard time even trusting my husband. And I expressed that to him, and because I just wanted him to know this is what I'm going through. And I know that it's not necessarily normal. So I'm just kind of like vocalizing what's happening. And I told him, I trust you. And I know that, like, I know it's fine, but I'm just having a hard time feeling comfortable with anyone else taking care of him other than myself. And it was hard for him to accept that
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
like that was not something we had prepared for. We hadn't had this talk about like, okay, so like,
But you
okay, so
don't,
when
do you? The baby
you
arrives,
don't,
and you're excited, when you're pregnant, and you don't think about, oh God, what's it going to be like when I have this baby? You don't think about talking to your husband like that,
yeah, I will
because it's
say
all
I
excitement. The excitement, the
exactly.
adrenaline, and the excitement, it kicks in.
Yeah. And it's also when it's your first baby, you can't, it's impossible to plan because you just
Yeah.
have no idea how you're
Yeah.
going to react, how they're going to react. Like you just have no idea. But I did tell my husband. So I will say that pre-pregnancy, I already dealt with anxiety and depression. So automatically, if that is something that you struggle with pre-pregnancy, super highly likely that you might get postpartum depression, or you might suffer from postpartum anxiety. And so that's something I talked to my doctor about beforehand. I kind of said, like, can you just put a little note in my chart? Please just watch her, because I'm telling you right now, I already have these issues, when I'm
Mm-hmm,
not
mm-hmm.
growing a human. So let's put it out there. But I think the only thing that I did say to my husband that had to do with kind of like my mental state as a new parent, I kind of told him, like, these are the general signs for postpartum depression. If you are seeing this in me and I am not, like, because sometimes you
You
can't see the
don't see it.
forest for the
Yeah.
tree. Yeah, you can't see it. You don't know what's happening. So I said, if you see this, I need you to kind of nicely, again, you have to be very careful and gentle and supportive with the way you speak to a new parent, because it's just such a vulnerable time. I said,
Mm-hmm.
I need you to kind of like nicely say something to me, and then we need to make a doctor's appointment. But I had no idea that postpartum anxiety was a thing at the time. So that didn't even, that didn't even cross my mind that my anxiety was going to get worse. But thankfully, I was in therapy pre-pregnancy, during my pregnancy, and shortly thereafter. So I feel like that just talking to someone, a neutral third party, especially someone who specializes in the treatment of anxiety or depression, or a maternal mental health therapist. That's actually my current therapist, specializes in maternal mental health. And I feel like that makes a big difference in terms of how she can hear what I'm saying and help me to understand where it's coming from a parent perspective. And I know people have mixed views on medication. I
Yeah.
I started an antidepressant when I was pregnant because my anxiety and depression, again, very common, my anxiety and depression spiked during pregnancy because the hormones were, they're
Yeah, the
just,
hormones kick. Yeah.
so I was struggling. So I started it about 3 months before I gave birth. And then, I had a really nice midwife towards the end of my pregnancy. And I saw her for one of my postpartum visits. And I felt comfortable with her. So I felt like I could talk to her. And she said, "How are you
That
doing?"
helps.
Yeah, like finding somebody who you're comfortable with, someone who you feel like is not going to judge you or make you feel like you're a bad parent or there's something wrong with you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she asked me how I was doing, and I said, "I'm okay. Maybe we should try just upping my dosage just for a little bit." And so, I did that and that worked for me. And as of April, what month is it? It's July. As of April, with the doctor's approval and oversight, I weaned off of the antidepressant. But, a lot of parents need antidepressants to help them be a better parent. And I actually have an entire episode about maternal mental health because it is a huge
Yeah, it is.
piece that just goes so overlooked. And it's really sad that there's so many people who are suffering and aren't getting a diagnosis or aren't getting the help that they need.
Or they're too
And
afraid
it's,
to ask. They're too
mm-hmm.
afraid to ask because of the stigma, and
Yeah.
they think that counselling isn't going to help them, and they
Mm-hmm.
think that if they go to counselling, people are going to think they're a bad parent, and why are
Yeah.
you going to counselling, and you don't need to go to counselling, you can cope, and it's not easy.
No. And that's one of the reasons why I am very upfront about the fact that I go to therapy, the fact that I have been on
Mm.
antidepressants, and the fact that I don't love parenting all day, every
Yeah.
day. It's just, yeah, it's not possible. It's human nature to not like it all day,
Yeah,
every day.
you need your space. You need to have me time. I mean, I've done a podcast recently on self-care, and it's giving you, the other mother, time to have that self-care, because you can't look after your baby 24/7.
No.
Because you need to sort of step out and say, right, well, I just want 5 minutes peace, or five
Yeah.
minutes to myself. And when your baby's born, I can understand why some people go through what you've gone through, because you've just got this little bundle that you've got to take care of, and
Yeah. And
suddenly it's like,
it's
what to
overwhelming.
do with
Yeah.
this?
Yes, it is newborns are very scary. Because they're just so fragile, and the weight and the pressure that you
Mm,
feel to just love it, one,
yeah.
and also be really good at it, and also lose all that baby weight and be super skinny but exercise
Yeah,
and also
yes.
sleep, and to just like be anything and everything for everyone else
But
when
it's you that's
just
got to be, yeah,
yeah, you just went through the biggest, I mean, the single
yeah,
biggest transition of your entire life.
yeah,
Of course, you need a second. You need some time to adjust. It is not, for most people, it is not automatic where you just kind of really throw yourself into this role and you're thriving. It takes time. There's a huge transitional period. I feel like I didn't start kind of feeling more like my pre pregnancy self until my son was about 9 months old, 10 months old.
So
I
yeah,
mean, it's a long time.
it is a long time, and I think. But did you have a supportive husband? I mean, your husband, was he supportive and helped you, or?
Yes, thankfully, I have a really, really supportive husband. We, I feel like I always thought of us as a team before we had our son. And now, though, I feel like our we're much stronger, we're much more cohesive, and we know how to work together in order to
Yeah.
take care. Yeah. But that, but that doesn't come overnight either.
No, I bet it doesn't, because it
Yeah.
must be overwhelming for the dad as well, because they've suddenly got this little bundle that they've got to, and I mean, from dad, I don't know, from the dad's point of view, we're not going down that route, but I just meant, with the breast, when you're breastfeeding well, if you're breastfeeding particularly, the dad probably feels, oh gosh, this little baby's part of me, but mum's looking after it. What do I do?
Yeah.
I've just got to sit and sort of look at the baby and go, oh, what are we?
Yeah, I have an episode about the changes that a relationship goes through when you have a baby as well. And it's very strange because the way that you see each other is different. The way that you interact with each other is different for a very long time. I would say it probably took the first 5 or 6 months of my son's life for my husband and I to kind of figure out how we work together and how to kind of be a team. It takes, again, it's such a big transition. It takes time.
And how to reconnect with yourself as well, and how to reconnect and have that intimate relationship that you had before.
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh.
Because that would be, because I mean, your body's gone through a completely different change, and you've might have had stitches, you might have had all that, and suddenly you think, I mean, we weren't going to talk about the sex side, but that must be
That's
pretty
okay.
hard.
I have an episode all about that coming up soon.
But that must be pretty hard as well, because I mean, I guess that's all part of what we're talking about. It's part of the postnatal depression and anxiety, because that can be an anxiety for you as well.
Oh yeah,
gosh,
absolutely.
I want to have sex with my partner, but gosh, I'm feeling anxiety. Gosh, I've got to go and look after the baby. Oh, the baby might not wake up. I've got to go and do that. So it's all, I guess that's all part of it.
Yeah, there is a term that I learned about 5 or 6 months ago called matrescence.
Oh.
And I feel like the way that you can kind of relate it to something that you already know is when you think about pubescence. So, when you are going through puberty, your body is changing, but your brain is really changing. And, that's why some days your 13-year-old kid acts like a total jerk. And then 20 minutes later, they're super nice and they love you and they want to hug you. It's just that transitional period where you're just growing and you're trying to figure out this new life stage. So matrescence is basically the exact same thing. It's the transitional period that a mother goes through when they first have their baby and they're trying to figure out how they're going to do this. Who are they? Can they do this? Who's going to help me? And it's really, really hard. It is not as easy as I feel like social media makes us think, or the TV and movies that we grew up watching makes us think. And I always come back to that when I talk about why I started the podcast, because I think it's important for everyone, not just parents, but everyone, to understand these are the things that are happening to a birthing person or to the birthing person and their partner. And these things are very hard. Like, let's give a little grace. You have to have a little time and patience, because it's not just like, oh, you're pregnant, eating for 9 months, and then you push 2 times and the baby's out and everything's
push 2 times. Come on. I don't think, I mean, I know some people are lucky, as you say, media give us that.
Yeah. There's definitely this narrative. There's this narrative out there that it's pregnancy kind of follows this, very linear formula. And unless you have experienced it, unless you have someone who has experienced it, who has talked with you honestly and candidly about it, it's a roller coaster. You're going left, right, up, down, backwards, forward. Like, it is so much. And that's a lot for a human, one person, to handle. Even if you have support, it's a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot. And I think it's people have got to sort of as you say, give the mother and the baby and the dad sort of respect to sort of think, wow, you've actually done it. Congratulations, rather than, oh
Yeah.
gosh,
Yeah.
yeah.
When you fitting back into your pre-pregnancy jeans, I mean, never.
Yeah, and it's society that expects you to, lose that weight really fast, and
Yeah.
they expect you to be slim, trim again. And you see all these supermodels who've supposedly had baby. Well, I'm sure they have had babies. That's a bit of enough to say, but you see all these supermodels who are out there that are so slim, trim after they've had a baby, and you sort of think, well, that's yes, you can be slim, trim after having a baby if you go jogging with your
If you have a
baby in a
personal
pram and
trainer.
everything
Yep.
else, but
Mm-hmm.
it takes work. It
Yes.
doesn't just
And
happen overnight. But then I guess, I
yeah.
don't know, I guess I'm putting this out to you as a mum. I guess there are some mums out there who just naturally fall back into it. There are mums just naturally get their bodies back. I don't know if that's possible, but
I will say it's been interesting to kind of, when I was pregnant, I knew at least like 2 or 3 people who were pregnant and also very close to where I was, week wise in my pregnancy. And at first, I did the comparison thing, and why doesn't my body look like their body? And
yeah.
they've lost, like they've lost more weight than I have. How come my body is different, et cetera, et cetera. But I have kind of realized that a lot of it truly is genetic. It really is. I have a friend who just gave birth less than 3 months ago, and I saw her, and she met my son, and I met her son, and she looked, I mean, she looked 5 years ago, like she looked the exact same. I know I look different, but it's so genetic. Her family are all super tall and thin. And my family is tall, not as tall and not as thin, it is really, it's one of those things that you constantly have to remind yourself to not compare your body
Yes.
to other people's body, which way easier said than done.
Yeah, of course it is.
I've done a lot of curating so I pretty much only use Instagram. I've done a lot of curating of my feed and kind of deleting people who are making me feel bad about myself, or deleting people who I feel like I'm comparing myself to, like I've curated my feed to reflect what I believe in, what I think, and to also not make me feel shitty about myself.
Yeah, and that's
Because, like that's not what social media is for. That's what happens often. I feel like, especially when you're a new parent, and again, you're just so vulnerable, and you're up late at nights, and what are you doing? You're on social media.
yes,
But
you're up late at night because your baby's not sleeping, or you're breastfeeding, or you're feeling exhausted, and as you say, overwhelmed, and you just need to sort of have a bit of mum time. Or yeah.
But you just have to be, it does, I feel like it takes some time to kind of separate real life from social media life. And it takes a lot of, I guess, like a lot of self-awareness to unfollow or block people, so that when you go on social media, you don't close the app feeling fat or feeling less than or feeling inferior. Like it was great, you saw what so and so's doing, and oh, she had her baby and that's the baby's name, and you close it, and it's not, negatively impacting the rest of your day.
Yeah, I think that's very valuable to, for mums to know, because a lot of them take it all on board, and you've just got to just close. If people are like that, you just delete them from your because
so much, again, so many things that I said are so much easier said than done.
Of course they are. Yeah, of course.
Right. If you're listening to this and you're a brand new mom, my son is 14 months old today. And
congratulations to your son.
Thank you.
And to you.
Thank you. And I will say, though, Kaila, 14 months postpartum, is extremely different than Kaila 4 months postpartum or 4 weeks postpartum. Like, again, it takes time. A year ago, my son would have been 2 months, right? Yeah, he would have been 2 months old. I was not thinking these things. I wasn't able to kind of just speak like, oh, just unfollow people if they bother you.
Yes.
No.
And it's not that easy. No.
It's not.
Exactly.
Yeah. I was deep in that anxiety, comparison, mode, and it was stealing my joy from my life and from just, just embracing the fact that this is, this is how my pregnancy went. This is how my postpartum body looks. And nothing else really matters because I don't have their body and they don't have my body,
Mm.
But
And
again,
as
way
you,
easier said than done. Just, you
yeah,
have
I
to
was
just
going to
keep
say that.
working. Yeah. Just keep working at it.
Well, to finalize this, as you've just said that, I'm going to ask you a question about what magical tip would you give to a first-time mum? You've basically said that, but as we've been discussing all this, what it can be like, what sort of magical tip would you give to that mum when you back 14 months ago, or 12 months ago, when your baby was 2 months old? Sort of what magic, that you've got your experience and you've had a bit of experience, what would you sort of say to that mum who's going through what you went through when they were 2 months old, when the baby was 2 months old?
So like I told you before we started recording, I've thought about this all week because I knew you were going to ask me this. I thought about this all week. And I mean, this is how you know I have anxiety, that I thought about it all week. And there are so many things that I would say, but I think one of the most important things that I wish someone had said to me is that you don't have to do everything by yourself. You're not supposed, like, we as humans are not designed to do this by ourselves. Like, we are pack animals, just like wolves, just like dolphins. Like, it's not something that you're supposed to be alone doing. So if you feel alone, try to speak up for yourself and, join a support group, join therapy, go to the park and try to talk to other people. It's so funny. I'm giving that advice because I would never do that. But, I would say just please remember that you're not supposed to do this alone. We're not designed to do this alone. You don't have to do it all by yourself. You don't have to be everything for your child all the time. It's not supposed to be that way. You are supposed to still be a human being, still be your own individual person. And that means occasionally handing the baby off to someone and not my, like, hands in the air, not my baby, not my problem. And again, a year ago, I would have done that. I would have been able to do it, but the anxiety in my head, at the time. So I totally understand that it's easier said than done, and that it takes some time to kind of just even work yourself up to ask for help, or to kind of even verbalize that you're struggling. But I think a lot of us have this perception that, well, I'm the mom, I'm the parent, so it's all up to me, and I have to do everything, and it's got to be me. And yes, like, sure, you are very much capable. You can, but it's not the best idea, not the healthiest thing for you. And you want to be healthy mentally and physically because you want to be there for your child. I very much am constantly reminding myself that when I, tell my husband, like, hey, I need a break. Like, I'm going to go into our guest bedroom. I'm going to watch TV for an hour. I just need some alone time. I'm very conscious of the fact that I'm doing that because an hour or two later, I'm going to feel better. And then I'm going to be a better parent. It all trickles down. Like, yes, you are the source, but if the source is dry, it can't feed anyone else, So you have to just know that you're not supposed to do it alone. Get some time for yourself, because you're supposed to have time for yourself. You're still, you may not feel like it, but that pre-pregnancy person, they're still in there. It's going to take
and you're
some
still
time.
A woman who's got the needs as well.
Yeah, and it's your right,
Mm-hmm.
you, just like you advocate for your child, you have to advocate for yourself. You take care of your child, you got to take care of yourself too, so that you can take care of your child.
It's like that before it goes, like that scenario in an aeroplane where they say to you, give yourself oxygen first and then give it to your child or give it to the person next to you, because if you don't give yourself that oxygen, you're not going to be able to give the oxygen to your child because you're not going to be in a state to be able to do that. Yeah. And I think that my father used to find that really hard to understand. I used to say that to Dad all the time, but my father was one of these people who just gave to everybody, and he didn't give to himself. And I said that to him one day, and he said, but I've had my life, I want to give it to you because you're, and I sort of thought, yes, Dad, that's true. But if you don't give yourself that oxygen, you're not going to be able to give it to me. And he found out that concept so hard. And I think that's a great concept for a mum, to just know that they've got to take care of themselves.
Yeah. So I feel like that is, I never had a hard time understanding that, that idea until I became a parent, until all of a sudden my knee-jerk reaction, if someone were to ask me like, quick, who do you put the oxygen mask on? My first answer is Robin, my son.
Yes.
And so, and so now it's like, no, wait, nope, hold on. And again, like you have to put it on yourself first in order to be able to help other people. But it is, as a parent, it just no longer.
It's a very hard thing to do. Yeah.
It almost seems just incorrect.
Yeah, it does. Definitely. Yeah. So after our wonderful discussion, and you've given great tips, if a mum wanted to sort of get in touch with you or have chat with you, or how would they go about doing that? I know you've mentioned your podcast.
Yeah, I would say I spend majority of my time when I'm not recording or editing. I spend a lot of time on the podcast Instagram account, and that is Parent Tell, no space. It's all one word, just the word parent with the word tell. So quick, teeny tiny story. So basically came up with the idea of the concept from show and tell. I don't know if you guys have that.
Yes, I have. Yeah.
Okay. So instead of show and tell, it's parent and tell. And I just took the and out. So on Instagram, I'm at Parent Tell. And then, I am always open and willing to receive emails from anyone and everyone. And so my email address is parenttellpod@gmail.com.
Okay. That sounds good.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Kaila, for coming on. I've really, really enjoyed talking to you. I've actually learned a lot more about postnatal depression and anxiety than I knew before. So it's been great catching up with you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. It's been really great.
It's been a pleasure. Kaila shared some great insights of her journey, and I learned a lot from her. I think it's so important to acknowledge how you are feeling, and don't be afraid to ask for help when you need it. I've included a link to Kaila's Parent Tell podcast in the show notes, and I highly recommend having a listen. You can access this at mybabymassage.net/podcast/028. mybabymassage.net/podcast/028. If you're looking for additional help or resources, I also run a free Facebook group called First Time Mums Lounge. So please join me and you'll gain access to tips to help you and your baby through the beginning stages of your journey. You can access the group by going to mybabymassage.net/Facebook. mybabymassage.net/Facebook. I also welcome questions, comments and feedback on my podcast episodes. Please feel free to reach out by sending me an email at info@mybabymassage.net. info@mybabymassage.net. And once again, thank you so much for listening.